Whoa, Tommy's got a little surprise there.
That wasn't me.
Oh, who was that? Seth, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy August.
Good morning, everybody. How's it going? It is Tuesday with the Explicit Measures Podcast. We didn't talk about anything for an intro today, so I think we're just going to get into the topic. I think it's a pretty good topic. I believe there's going to be a lot of debating or arguing or however you want to call it today. I think there's a lot of good opinions on this one. And we're talking about what does a Power BI CV look like? And so I didn't understand. This question came from a gentleman who's actually on the line right now. On the chat window right now. We don't have a line. You can't call us. Don't worry.
Not a voicemail yet.
No live call-ins. Wynn Hopkins, out of Australia, I believe that correct me if I'm wrong there, has asked, his question was, can you guys talk about what does a resume or a CV? And I didn't know what CV meant. So, Tommy, what's a CV?
Oh man, you're putting my. I'm already terrible saying English words, so now you want me to say Latin. But curriculum vitae. I'm going to probably say it the Italian way, but it's basically a fancier version of a resume. It's elongated. It basically includes everything you've done, every accomplishment. Nothing's ever taken out. It's almost like a matrix style biography of everything you've done from a job point of view. So you don't take anything out, but you keep adding to it. So
awesome. So it's like an all-encompassing work portfolio. Everything you've done.
It could be multiple pages. It doesn't have to necessarily follow standardized like one page. It just as many accomplishments as you've gone over the time that you've grown, been in the career.
Yep.
That's what goes in the CV.
Awesome. Yeah. Resumes when I was in college, we're always told, make it short. Put just the most relevant things for the job. One page. That's all that people have time to read. And a CV sounds it's like a little bit larger than that.
I'm pretty confident I said that correctly too.
I'll go with it. I'm not gonna dispute it. Other people may, but not me.
The people who are right. Yeah.
So talking about your career and your resume, what kind of things do we look for? So I'll kick it over to Seth. Seth's got some articles around this. Seth's been doing this quite a lot recently, and we actually have a couple of blog posts on Power BI tips around this topic. And there's a 3-part series. Maybe Seth, maybe go into a little bit. What is the 3-part series, and then kind of where is part 3? I think really addresses what we're talking about here for the resume part.
Thanks, Mike.
Teed it up there.
Let's talk about those. No, I did write a 3-part series, and the first one I wanted to write was the third one, which is kind of the topic today. Right? how do you represent your Power BI skills?
Yeah.
But before you can represent your skills, you kind of need to understand where you're at and how to assess yourself. And that's where the first blog comes in, where that's where I came up with, the skills matrix, kind of breaking down all of the different areas in Power BI so that the larger audience, when looking for roles to fill, understand which skill sets they're looking for in a particular developer or ad hoc report writer, et cetera, where they fit in the org and what are their needs. And it's kind of a neat exercise to kind of go through that skills matrix to kind of rate yourself where you're at in terms of just generalized areas of understanding, whether it's DAX or Power Query or visualization or embedded or administration, etc. And that's kind of the starting point, because once you know where you sit, you can kind of move on to the second phase, which is, the second blog, which is how do you build those skills? Like, what are your areas of focus that you want to drive and dive into? And these exercises kind of help or set your plan, which you would represent in your CV or your resume. For all intents and purposes, and I kind of asked this in the chat window too, like I'm gonna roll CV and resume together today, like the shortened version of like it's the first step to get you in the door, right? Kind of thing. So just to set context, but I think there's a lot of things in here, and ultimately that interaction of setting yourself up for success to get an interview and then crushing the interview kind of comes through this process that we'll talk about today.
And I think it's interesting here too. So taking the skills assessment kind of gives you a bearing on what areas of the Power BI landscape are you strong in, right? There's a lot to
Sure.
things that you can be doing in Power BI. There's data modeling, there's the Power Query side of things, just pushing data together. There's another layer of building reports and how does that work, building DAX measures as well, so more part of that modeling element. But if you look at another article that Steve Campbell wrote on Power BI Tips was around, Power BI is just a part of a greater landscape that organizations are using. And so there's actually a lot of other technology pieces here at play that make sense to what you may need a team to do. And so you're going to have, as I guess, particularly as your Power BI matures in your organization, right? There's going to be other things you're going to need to know about, analysis services. Where does that get its information from? Is it Blob Store and Lake, or is it SQL Server? How do you move data around? There's a whole. So I always communicate that Power BI is like the tip of the iceberg. That's kind of like the last step, and under the hood or underneath that, there's actually a larger iceberg underneath there of other things that also support Power BI, because Power BI is getting the data together, but there's a data source and a whole bunch of other things underneath that could potentially be used as there. And all of those people, there's multiple roles that go there as well. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's you bring up like it's important for you as an individual to understand what the role is that you're
Mhm.
applying for, because if even
Yep.
if I think about some of the roles we put out, Power BI report author,
Yep.
right? Where does that live? Is that a business unit, or is that in the enterprise BI team? Because those are two completely different environments.
I would agree.
Like, I think, Tommy, you're probably more on the business side, interacting with a lot of business side
Yeah.
applications, right? Power apps, like a lot of
Right.
the front end. How do I tie all this together? I'm firmly on the enterprise side and the BI team. Mike, you're probably all over the place.
I'm all over the place.
But the spectrum of sources that you're going to be pulling from, and the
Yep.
expectations that a company would have around your skill sets are going to be wildly different, or
Correct.
could be.
Yep.
And
Right.
yeah, and that's very true because Seth, to your point, like we kind of consider here at our organization all the different departments and teams like their clients, because that's basically how they are, and in a sense that's how we treat them. Like we're on the same team,
Yep.
but at the same day, like we're their support. So whether it is for the reporting, for the Power Platform or the automation, like we basically go to each team and we would, we basically kind of scope out what are the needs, what are the pain points, and then we, looking at the solutions, and they rely on us for the data we provided to them.
Yep.
From a person point of view, man, this is in some place I don't know necessarily where I lean, because you can have, let's say, the resume of someone just being able to understand DAX. Like let's say they're very experienced in Power Query and very experienced in DAX. They've read all the data visualization books, and obviously, does that necessarily qualify someone or equate someone to being a productive, impactful employee? You want to say that's obviously what you need first to be, to be in this position. But part of me doesn't know, because if I look at my own career path, and I didn't know Power BI obviously when I started using it because it just came out. So not a lot of people did, but like if I was to hire someone for, let's say, to go introduced into Power BI, and because again, there's a wide spectrum of, you could be the data engineer, you could be on the back end of this, you can be on the front end of this. You can be the guy doing the Azure and the integration, or you could be the guy building the reports and also
Correct.
scoping out with your clients or departments, like what
Sure.
the needs are.
Yep.
That's the part I kind of focus on in one sense, is you may be able to build a report, but man, if you can't talk to people, explain the data and help them trust it, how does that look on a resume? And I think that's maybe a question I'll
That's really
ask
good.
you.
Yeah.
Like how can someone present that when you're looking just on a CV or a resume?
This is okay. This is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Seth.
Oh, I would like a lot of what your description are things that come out in an interview.
Okay.
And to me, right, I would
Yeah.
say that's after the CV.
Yes. So here's one thing that I look for, and this is one thing, and I'm gonna speak to my career and what happened to me and what happened how things changed for me. I was in at the category management team at the time. We were working a bunch of analytic things together. So category management is products, how they're selling, what's selling the most,
Hmm.
positioning things on the shelves kind of thing. So I was working for a battery company at the time, and I we did a lot of work around analytics. Companies were giving us their sales numbers. We were crunching the numbers and trying to produce back to them what's the best mix of products that you need to make the most amount of money or maximizing profits here. So I went through some training classes that was all around category management, and the company is called Delta Associates. And I took their bronze level or their black belt one
Hmm.
training, and honestly, it I thought I knew data, but all I knew how to do was kind of put it in tables and kind of pick through them. I didn't understand
Hmm.
how to pick out the most actionable insight. And so this class literally taught me like how to like look at information and say, okay, I've got 50 things I'm looking at. How do I know which product is bleeding the most? Like this is where I learned the concept of position and direction. It, super relevant, right? Just because you put a data point on a screen that says, we did, whatever, $1 million in sales, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
$1 million could be
Right.
great or not great. I don't know. So you're comparing yourself to like relative things around you, and so you need to know like the direction of that. Yeah, I'm at $1 million in sales, and I'm up 5%, 10%. But even that is still not enough information to kind of give you what you want. So where I look for things is I look for people who've gone through specific training things to help them become better analytical people. And this class was for me, it was a really in-depth class. There's quizzes at the end, you get a certification. Highly recommend it. And I'll actually put the link. I love them so much. I put it on Power BI Tips website because it's just relevant. I think you need to go there. I think you need to train about it. It's something that was changing and pivotal in my career. I think it really helped me understand the value of data and start critically analyzing like what are you looking at. Another area is like that in this class that kind of taught me was just because you lose, like you may not have as many dollar sales this year versus last year. However, you may have gained market share. And so market share was a very big concept that I guess, in marketing classes, they go through a lot of these things. And that is an area where I feel like that's another market share is very interesting because you could gain market share but lose in revenue, but yet you're still winning comparatively to all the other people in your industry. So there's some really interesting analytics there. And sometimes people, I mean, I've been in companies where, oh, the numbers are red, they're going down, freaking out. And like that's not necessarily true all the time.
Right.
So I think being able to communicate those things and understand the data, I think that's a very valid skill. And so when I look at resumes, I'm looking for people who have gone through that kind of training or spending that kind of time and effort to become skilled in those areas.
Yeah. I, I think let me go on a little bit of a diatribe to initiate some Tommy kickback maybe. So I wrote this blog series because literally probably been interviewing and reading resumes for the last 9 months. If I'm gonna condense what I think are the top things to put on a CV or resume, it would be these. So I think there's two main areas. One is obviously the intent is to summarize and condense your experience into a page or two, or
Yeah.
maybe three, maybe. And what people I think gloss over is they focus on the 2 or 3 pages and not how much time you should be spending making sure that what you are putting on paper is the most condensed, summarized way to explain something. The worst thing you can do is think that you need to provide your entire work history on a cert CV or resume or try to explain it in great depth and detail. I don't think that's the purpose of a CV or resume. The point is to convey
Agree with
your
that.
experience, and secondarily, the most important part is pique the interest of the reader, right? Like what you want to do is be different from other people and different from other resumes. So it's fine to pick a stock, Word doc that allows you to like pick, format in a professional way, but deviate from it. Do like make something that separates yourself from other people. If you're going to be doing design and visualization, like tweak it a little bit, add a little flair here and there that like professionally makes, things look good. For things that I want to see on a resume, I love the skills section and the rating, right? It's a like whether it's on the left or the right, like what are your language skills? DAX, modeling, like you throw analysis services in there, that's a win for me because you're talking about like the back end of Power BI. How do you rate yourself? Like, do you have a little rating scale, 1 to 100, 1 to 10? Where do you rate yourself? Because what that allows me to do is understand where you're at or how you're rating yourself, and it gives me the litmus for if I want to interview you. And you're asking for a certain salary and you're a 9 in DAX, I know where to spend my time. Because if you're not a 9 in DAX and you're a 4 and your salary request is way outside the bounds, then there's a disconnect here, right? So it helps me understand where you think you are in terms of the things I'm looking for, right? Like a lot of like I could see analysis, like Power Query. We don't use that, like not in my space. We're doing other things. So if you're a 2 there, I don't care. If you're an 8 or a 9 in DAX, I care, right? Cool. Like I'm gonna dig into the other parts of your resume, but you're giving me a high level indicator of are you my guy or my girl or not, right? Like I need these skills to fill this role. You just pointed me that, yep, you're that person. I want to focus more on this resume. I think another thing that you can add into a CV or resume that's just as important as that is a link to a report. Like it is the one time that I'm going to highly recommend using publish to web, right? Like like Power BI roles, there's no, like in my mind, there is no better way to set yourself apart than have a link to go have me look at your work. Like showcase what you do. That way, like even in the interview, if people want to see how you operate or how you work, like they have that representation of your skills. You're showing that you've done something.
Yep.
And better yet, like give them a link to the PBIX so they can go dig and see how you built things out. Right? It doesn't have to be like super complex, but the more you show, the more you're already before the interviewing displaying the skills that I would want or need in that particular role.
Yeah.
And then finally, like what piques the interest of the interviewer. And for me, it's the things you're doing outside of work, right? It's community. Like, so can I see how you're interacting with people? How do you respond? What's your communication style like? Are you blogging? Right? Like that's a huge one. Like I learned that blogging is this. I learned this thing. I'm teaching other people how to do it. Right? Do you walk through the steps? Do you understand the concepts fully? Do you like how are you explaining things? And like that's a huge win as it relates to like what type of individual are you. In my mind, we call this the learning mentality and things like that, but
Yep.
it just sets yourself apart and raises the level of whether or not you're going to get an interview versus somebody who doesn't have those skills.
I feel like we'd end the podcast there and it would be pretty good. Seth, that was excellent. So I actually halfway through it,
shortest podcast ever.
I crossed my figures because it was literally like lighting up a bunch of topics and I didn't want to forget a few.
I'm literally I'm chatting them in the chat windows like between you guys because I'm trying.
So,
I gotta remember this. Gotta remember this. Gotta remember this.
So I love that idea with the skills and rating them because I think a lot of people would be scared to do that. I've never thought of that because why would you say you're a 5 out of 10 in something? Like obviously that's not showing it, but you're giving context. I mean, this could have been the shortest podcast episode ever if we said what should be on a CV, that they've done Power BI, they know DAX and Power Query, done. But obviously, in a sense, not just what are we looking for, but what should someone, write on their CV. Man, that's a great idea of putting, I test me. I think I'm a 9 out of 10 on DAX. Like I know what I can do. That perks someone's interest because every CV, if you had 100 people who are applying for a Power BI job, are going to have DAX on there.
Oh yeah,
obviously,
for sure.
So it makes a lot of sense to kind of put yourself out there in a different way where you're like, yeah, I could improve my Power Query, but I'm pretty advanced still. And compared to just I've done Power Query.
I also
Um,
I also think it's a function of like where you're at in your company too.
yeah.
So I think a
Oh, yeah.
portion of this is particularly around these ratings of things, and what we do in interviews, is I'll ask you there's topical areas that I'm interested in, right? I'm actually interested in like your Power Query skills, your DAX skills, your SQL skills, and we'll kind of go through a couple key topics. Your administration of Power BI. How do you feel in the admin portal? What have you touched there? And what I typically find is, um, it, everyone's scale is slightly different. So you will get varying numbers. And a lot of people don't want to rate themselves low in a certain area because they want to look like they know everything. They want to,
Right.
I'm here to be Power BI. I should know everything. But what I would echo is it's very hard to lie to like MVPs because MVPs are very involved in all the areas of Power BI, and we kind of know, like, we've been there since the beginning. We've watched it grow up from nothing to what it is now, and we're very in tune with all the blogs and things that are coming out. And so I feel like a lot of times we have to explain to people in interviews, like, hey, we're talking about, are you the person that you go to, right? On a scale of 1 to 5, are you the person that everyone comes to get questions or answers around this particular topic? And then it kind of helps them frame their mind, because it puts it in context of like, okay, at my company, of the people I'm around, how good am I compared to the people around me? And so
Yeah.
that's typically like a good place. And more often than not, we see people overrating themselves in these areas because they don't like, either their company doesn't have the skills to challenge them,
Yeah.
or they're able to skate by on lower end skills, right? I can write a couple sums and I maybe know about a calculate function, but I can't explain to you filter context. Well, if you can't explain filter context to me, that is
You're not a
very that
9 out of 10.
you're not a 9 out of 10. So you're way, you're in my mind, you're lower on that spectrum,
Yeah.
on that scale there, because filter context is everywhere, and it's
Yeah.
all in your DAX. It's how you integrate the data model between the visuals and how those things interplay together. And only when you understand filter context is a lot of these other things unlock for you about how you can do Power BI.
Yeah. I
So
feel like, oh,
the
go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, because it came up in the chat as well. In the interview, it's hard for you to like rate yourself, right? And
Yeah.
that's why we qualify it in that regard. But that's why I built the skills matrix, right? In the spectrum of how you rate yourself, man, use that as a link. Like, I rate myself as a 5, 9, whatever. Here's my reference point.
Yep.
Link it to the skills mate. Like, just, I'm not saying it's the be all end all of like skills in Power BI, but at least it provides the frame of reference that's missing in the conversation,
Correct.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And to get
And
the
if
foot in
you're
the door.
if you're yeah, if you send me a link to like, here's the thing I'm basing my skills against, and I can see, that you have all of these skills underneath you, plus because you're rating yourself here, I should know where you're at.
Yeah.
And the other point, Tommy, that you made, that I want to reinforce, because it is probably the number one point I'm going to make today. You said, I'm putting these things on my resume. Test me. That is exactly right? You can guarantee,
Right.
or you should guarantee, that what you put on your resume, you're going to get asked about. And the number one thing that will kill your job possibilities when you get into that interview is if you have embellished on your resume
Mm-hmm.
and your skills don't align to the conversation. Now, I understand there's nerves, people are nervous depending on who you're talking to, whatever. But if you break all trust right
yeah.
out of the gate, and that's exactly what you're doing when you're like, I'm a 10 in DAX. What does that mean? I wrote
I've done a calculate.
something.
I've done a
I
calculate.
dropped a an implicit measure onto the page. I'm a 10. I know how to do that. Like, you instantly, I'm telling you, the person just goes, check out, I'm done, because I can't trust you. Like, you're rating yourself way off these skills. You don't have these skills, and you should expect that you're going to get a technical interview. Like, our process at the company I'm at, and or any company I will be working for, right? Or in the past, the first interview is a technical one. Listen, personality, who you are as an individual, all of those, team fit, communication style, like, super important.
Mm-hmm.
but you're being hired for a technical role. Like Power BI, regardless if it's in the business or on the back,
Yep.
it's a technical role to build reports or solve problems with report building. If you are asking me to pay you money for a technical role and you're lying and you don't have these skills, I don't care if you're the greatest guy in the world, greatest person in the world. Like, you're not going to get hired. So the resume has to be in line with that conversation.
Yep.
And like the way I operate is pique the interest, show me who you are. But if you undersell yourself and you come to that conversation and blow my mind, like, the chances of you getting hired are much higher than
And
anybody else who's
it,
like, are you really a 9? Because I wouldn't put you
yeah.
there.
And it's funny. This episode today is solidifying. I have pen and paper for now on because I'm trying to rewind the video just to watch something. This is excellent. But it's funny too. You say with the skills, because I don't just want to know that you've read a bunch of books and you have the book smart. Like, I almost want to hear too the frustrations you've had, because I feel like anyone who's on the skills matrix who's advanced has had frustrations on any part of that skill set, because there's something they try to figure out. And I think for a lot of us, it's very common the farther you go. With we've talked about it with when we learned DAX, we all had the same issues, so to like, or like, the very similar
Yeah. Yep.
valuation. But so one thing you said, a lot of things you said, Seth, but one thing I want to focus on too is, when it comes to how do you actually show that not only are you book smart and you've built a report, but you've built a report for others that has made an impact, right? And like, because I think that's what I want to see. I want to see not just that you can build a report, but I want to see that you can translate a need, a request, or a project and build something that's going to make an impact and further adapt or increase the trust and the reliance on that report. Because we've talked about this. We've all had a report where we took hours to build. We thought it was great, but no one used it. So is it really a great report? And I think the two things that I would say is things that you do outside is huge. I've seen this in my own career when I moved from Florida to Chicago. When I was looking for opportunities, I would speak to recruiters and speak to companies, and I would tell them everything I've done with Power BI and adoption and governance, and they're like, great, great. And then I told them, like, yeah, I've also led the Tampa Power BI user group. I speak, at multiple conferences. We put together this program, this project professional program in Tampa. It was a 9-month series, and you could hear people light up on the other side.
Yep.
Because it was your ability to teach. Because what we do is not so much about just showcasing data; it's about making an impact. Because we're not direct revenue people. At the end of the day, we're not directly creating revenue for a company. But what we can do is actually provide an impact. So my first point is what you can showcase if you're teaching others. Not that that's a be all end all, but man, that separates you. If you're involved in community, if you're doing things outside to teach, because if you can teach it, odds are you can probably do it. The other things I would say is in your resume and the CV, I want to see not just built reports from Power BI and shared it to the organization. I want to see, personally, I want to see usage numbers. I want to say we've increased usage and adoption of Power BI by 20% since I've been on, over the last 2 years. I want to see that we've integrated processes, whether it's through the Power Platform in general, or that we've we've removed Excel reports and have moved to Power BI, and I was a strong leader in that, because that shows me that you also understand not just the report, but you understand the platform, you understand the industry you're in,
Yep.
of that you're relying trust. Those two things together, I think, are showcase a lot of intangible skills, not so much of the experience, but they showcase a lot of intangible skills of almost things you can't teach. So
there's a lot of thoughts. I've been typing up a number of questions here. So I think one point I'm gonna step back here just a little bit and say, to your point of test me, Seth. I think you and Tommy, you made it the point initially is test me in what I'm doing. I think there's a lot to say for when people say Power Query. One of the areas that we kind of dig into is how many times have you edited in the advanced editor, and then asking deeper questions around that. I mean, this is maybe more about the interview than necessarily the CV, but like, to Seth's analogy on the skills matrix, right? That makes a lot of sense to have. Okay, a Power Query 6 requires you do these kind of things, and so custom functions or custom um, Power Query functions has its purpose. And so when people say they've written that, I like to go in and say, hey, let's see exactly what you're doing there and explain to me what was the use case. What could Power Query not do that required you to write that custom function? And so some people will say yes, they know everything, but they won't actually be able to tell you exactly what's happening in that scenario. And so I'm looking for people not only who can solve problems but can articulate them. So that's kind of one thing we go, be prepared on your CV. If you can be clear about um, what you are, what challenges you've solved, and potentially how you solve them. That's actually another good, another thing that I'm looking for here as well. And I think to Tommy's point here, towards the end here, he was talking about um, to Power BI is very young. It's only 6-7 years old, so it's relatively new in the market. And if you look at other tools like SQL or analysis services, they've been out a much longer time, and so they have a lot more runtime on them, and they've grown out of other products. Analysis services kind of grew out of MDX, and kind of like that was the initial version of large data warehousing, and analysis services has kind of is the migration of that into tabular models. So as we think about all these different areas, I think people and particularly companies are looking to bring in talent that knows what they're doing and can teach other people. So I think the market right now in general is heavily geared towards people who know how to teach. And my camera looks like it's really fuzzy, so let's see if we can unfuzzify it.
Someone says you're showcasing fuzzy matching.
I don't know why
So-
it's so fuzzy right now.
I agree with you, Mike, but like, would you say the same thing if you broaden your spectrum of like brand new folks, right? Like we're like junior to senior level. Like I think when you hit mid to senior level is where I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, yep.
I wouldn't expect those teaching things from
Yeah.
a lower end role.
Sure. I would totally agree with that too. I think yes, I agree there.
So I think you hit on a really good point. That is the main part of something we haven't talked about yet, right? In this entire 30 minutes so far, what have we not talked about in the CV part? The experience part.
Your education,
Yeah.
what college you went to,
or education, but like
We're not
all
talking
the
about the CDL.
all the details that create the really long CVs.
Yep.
Right. Like, and when I say condense and summarize your experience, a great way to do that is what Mike stated. Like in each of your line items, what is the business problem you solved?
Yep.
What are the straightforward explanation of like tools or technology or like complex code part that would be like interesting that of how you solved it? And what was the impact? Do you know what the impact of that was, right?
Mhm.
Because it's not just using tools and technology, it's
Right.
understanding what you're doing to solve business problems. Like they're not paying us because we build cool Power BI reports, right? We're do you understand like the impacts? And like that's the stuff that you want to fill detail in with, because I'm assuming you know how to do your job because you're applying to do it, or it's a base level role. You may not have the experience, but
Yeah.
if you can showcase that you have this level of understanding and summarization, you're showing the person who's reading your resume that you've put thought and effort behind this, as opposed to just throwing out a bunch of details. And I'm not saying that details are bad, but I think what people forget is like what I say in my blog series, like you are one in a sea of resumes.
Yeah.
When somebody's reviewing resumes, they're just like, yes, you might have automated things that are looking for, keywords and things like that, like DAX or whatever, and that pops things up. But I can't tell you how many resumes look exactly the same. And the longer they get, the harder it is for the person reading them to digest or figure out who you are. So like if you have a 3-page resume and every one of your things is a paragraph, they're not reading that. They're skimming it.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to like figure out like, okay, where's the important nugget that's going to tell me whether or not this person understands this concept, or is the right person for the hire. Like, that's the reality of the situation. Hundreds of people are applying for the same job.
Yep.
You
And
have to
yeah,
make yourself set yourself apart.
so two quick points. So one, I agree with someone building a report. If they're just churning and burning and that's all they're looking to do, and that's all they in a sense know, that's not the point of a report. It's just for the sake of building a report. They better know the purpose of why they're building the reports and they're putting the data together, and you'd want to see that. The other thing that, and I don't know if this is going to be contentious or not, but
Oh,
like
let's hope so.
I'm kind of hoping so, but I'm not. We're not doing like the morning show just to say it for the sake of it. But or maybe we are. We'll find out. But I'm looking for someone, and let's say a little more junior role, right? I'm almost okay if someone has very basic skills, but they're showing some intangibles of, and I don't know if you can really show this on a CV, so I don't know if this diverts, but almost like an MVP in the making, so to speak, with those intangibles of, I really think more than being a 10 out of 10 in DAX, if someone's studious in terms like this desire and passion to learn,
Yep.
man, I think they can go a lot farther than someone who is just really technical. Because I think that's what's going to make the impact really at a company. Because if someone can just, let's say you have someone who can do functions and loops and Power Query, that's great. It's great. But if they don't know the application for it, and also they're not that desire to learn and increase their tool belt because they know it's a solution-based tool,
Mhm.
and that's what I would look for. So because I mean, this goes into, it was like my experience when I graduated from college. I wanted to get into marketing and PR, and they're like, "Do you have experience?" I'm like, "No." They're like, "Well, you need experience." I'm like, "That's why I'm here." And that loop of, where of like, no, and they're not teaching Power BI in college, so that person's already, I don't want to say, they might have some difficulty. So if you're hiring someone who's pretty junior, who maybe just wants to get into the Power BI space
Mhm.
for a Power BI role, but they have those, call them intangibles, like I would be more inclined to like almost like tutor or like grow that person. I don't know if where you guys stand on that.
So I think the desire to learn is definitely something you want to look for. I think it's very hard to convey that on a CV.
Sure.
I definitely think that's something that I would definitely want to push more people to do, is to be a learning person. I think part of that, though, I think a way you can kind of gauge that a little bit is looking how much engaged they are in the community. So one thing you can think of, like, if you have, so let's just, I'm going to spitball here for a second, but like imagine you should have a Power BI community login. Like, you've been able to go to the community, anyone can get in there, anyone can participate at any level. So what I'm looking for is some of your engagement. So maybe you want to share hey, I'm on the Power BI community, this is my username, right? And I've been actively asking questions, I've been getting answers, I've been answering questions, right? And I can see how many kudos you've gotten on there as well. So it's kind of like a generalized scoring system of like where you fall in that Power BI community. If you're creating content and teaching and learning, I would expect some things on there. And you don't have to have your resume as a Power BI report, right? I could just say, show me something that's publicly available that is something you produced. Maybe you did something with COVID numbers. Maybe you did something with whatever, like send me a PBIX file of some publicly available information, right? If you think you're wanting to get that level of job, I would highly recommend do something in a Power BI report and share that and say, here's a link to go get this thing, or here's the OneDrive. So if you can't publicly share it with, because it takes a publish to web, you have to have a tenant to share things in. There's really no medium today that allows you just to kind of generally share things without a tenant. But you can still email someone a PBX file. You can give them that information. So I think there's definitely some validity to there. And another area there also is, show me some of your community-based things. But I'll also say, tell me what you read, right? Get like when we're in the interview or things that tell me some sources of information. I know where the sources of information are, but I want to know where they are. Like, do you just Google everything, or do you actually go, oh, I read the Power BI blog every week when it comes out?
That's
Oh,
a great college.
yeah. I'll go read, Guy in a Cube's got really good videos. I've watched a couple of those. They're very informative. And like give me some of those other details. I want to know that you're following, Imke, and I always say her name wrong, but you're following people who know Power Query really well. Miguel Escobar. He's another guy who's very good in that space. You know about, training elements that are out in the public that are either free or you've gone to go use them. Tell me you know about them. And that also helps me know that you're kind of a learner in that space.
So I'm gonna follow here, Tommy, even though your mouth was open.
It's always open. So
to
don't
the
worry about
experience, to the experience. No, to you had a marketing
Yeah.
example, like you went in and you didn't have
Right.
experience, so you said, "This is why I'm here." There was a question in the chat, like, "What do you do, if they don't give you the chance because you don't have an experience, right?"
Right.
And this is how and why I aligned the blog series the way I did, right? Because your CV or resume should be the representation of the work you've already done for yourself,
Mm.
right? Assessing where you're at, building your own skills, right? And in this experience layer is where I would say is building your own skills. If you want to get into an industry that their questions are what is your experience level, be like, well, I don't have practical experience, but over the last 3 months, I've researched things and I built this Power BI report that analyzes
Right.
like all the things in their industry, and I guarantee you the interviewer is going
Yeah.
to be like, so wait, you don't have any like practical business, but you research and you know all these concepts, and this is the report you put together. Like you're a little off here, but holy crap, dude, like that shows a lot of
Yeah.
initiative. It
And
shows you want to be in my space. It shows
yeah.
you're a learner. Like, and my whole point in all of this is you're not going to tell people who your comprehensive experience is, whether it's 20 or 30 or 40 years in business or right out of school, in a 2 to 3 page document. You have to have links and show people what you've done. And in order to show people what you've done, you have to do something. Be
Yeah.
distinctive, be
Yeah.
different,
Here's another
do something.
You
here's
know,
another
you've
good one.
actually you've converted me because I think at the beginning of this podcast we had the conversation about should you show a report. I'm still on the opinion that you shouldn't show a resume as a Power BI report. For whatever reason I don't. There's a
I
few
think you do
reasons I
both.
don't.
I think you have
I
a
like
resume,
yes.
and then you have a link that is
Yeah.
like, if you want to consume my resume in a Power BI form, here's the link.
Right. Or I like the idea better of taking industry, like especially if you're out of college, like take your major and analyze that and build that a report. That is something neat.
Sure. Take
But
what you know, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
The resume in a Power BI report is I'm
I'm
poor.
telling you,
Yeah.
when you do it right. So when I will say this, one of my top developers did this, and he is like, he's probably one of my best guys. And the thing is, what does it do? It says, it basically, you have an opportunity to engage somebody in a way in a Power BI report to show them your skills. And he did it so effectively that not only myself, but my
Yeah.
boss, we both spent like 20 minutes in this just clicking around. And like, when you when you can, when somebody goes, it's your opportunity to basically impress somebody. And both of us took the moment and we're like, holy cow, like I just spent more on this one resume than I have
Mhm.
in the last 15 combined.
Yeah.
Like, that's the person I want.
So-
And that's what that report does, Tommy. It
Yeah.
allows you to differentiate yourself and engage people. Are you a good report writer?
Yeah.
Right?
Here it is.
That's your
All right.
practical way of
Well,
showing
would
them.
you substitute that and not have a paper or a page form resume?
I think you need both.
Okay.
Right? Like, you submit because you're going to find, like, in all the automated tools, they have all the, find the keywords, and you need that. But I think it is prominent on your resume. Like, if you want to consume this in a Power BI format, here's a link to my publish to the web.
Yep. I would agree with that.
So one thing, this was in the chat, or Mike, did you have something to say? Because I'm going to
I
go
did.
a little off course. Okay.
I want to just drop in one more thing here. And a lot of chat has been happening around the Workout Wednesdays. So it's workout-wednesday.com, Power BI challenges or something like that. I put the chat in the link. This is another great exercise. A lot of people are saying they're doing it. It's basically specific challenges where you go in and you build a report based on, like, it basically says, here's the challenge. You need to build this kind of feature. We're going to use aggregation tables. We're going to use, we're going to make a certain type of chart. And so they give you a data set and they basically say, go to town. And then you do it for like a week, I think it is. And then you come back and then there's an answer that basically appears at some point in time too. So you kind of show up, get the challenge, do it, and then come back from that challenge. And then now you've learned this a little bit of skill. So in participating in that is good. They encourage people to share their content through the website. So it's another way where you can say, here's my reports that I've built. And again, I'll echo, like, it doesn't you don't have to have, if you don't feel comfortable putting your resume out there as a PBIX file, fine. Do other things. There's a million open data sources that you can go around. If you like baseball, like Tommy, do a bunch of baseball reports or build something there that's interesting. And so share that on LinkedIn. Like, I'm a huge proponent of stuff that's on LinkedIn. Fill out your LinkedIn page, put a bunch of really rich things there, and you can enhance that LinkedIn page with a lot of other rich content, like stuff that you're doing. Are you participating? Are you making videos about things? Are you, like, what are the other things that your surface area is? Put it on LinkedIn and say, here's my LinkedIn page. And it gives me a lot more ability to dig through, like, what are you commenting on? What are you sharing? Are you writing articles on there? Are people reacting to those articles? So there's another kind of a rich layer there that I can go look at that kind of gives me some more context about you.
And to be honest, I think you actually literally hit on my hesitation with maybe the Power BI report resume or showcasing one report.
Yep.
Honestly, for the fact that it's only one report, because I've seen this in my experience where someone's asked to build a report, they build this great report, but it's their data, everything, but that's all they know how to do. And it's like, but the Wow Wednesdays or Wows, like if you have multiple reports that all have a different facet, a different layout with because it's a different solution, that to me is the impact. Like that to me is what I think would showcase anything. If you had 3 reports that all had a different problem and a different solution, now I know what you can provide. Because to me, the one report is almost like, can you draw? And you can draw a dog really well.
It took you 6 weeks to do it, but you can
but
draw
you
one
can't draw
dog.
anything else. And I think that's where my hesitation is when you showcase just one report. Obviously, you have to go through the interview process.
I love that comment, Tommy, because it also separates what you're trying to do is, do you know how to do your job really well only in the context of the company that you were in?
Right.
Or do you understand the concepts to be able to replicate that same thing everywhere? Like, I've been a firm believer and actually practiced the, kind of, I can go into any environment and work with the subject matter experts and deliver an outcome. I don't need to know finance. I don't need to know marketing. I don't need to know sales. Like I know a lot of these things now, but I rely on experts to tell me a lot about their business and the logic.
Right.
I just do what I do and replicate, like build the things they don't know how to build.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of complexity in there. And there are absolutely areas where, especially in finance and financial area, like the complex calculations that you need to do that take a lot of time to learn, et cetera. But that's the difference, I think, between a lot of what we're recommending here and the norm, right?
Right.
Do you need to do the things that we're talking about to get a job? The answer is no, right? But the recommendations that we're making not only kind of enhance your life, they enhance your career, they drive satisfaction, because ultimately what we're saying here, or at least what I am, is the more you invest in yourself in these technical areas that you enjoy doing, the more valuable you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the CV and the resume should show people the value that they are getting in you coming on board. Then the interview is your job to make sure that that's the place that's going to value your skill and that you can grow and you can continue to be investing in yourself along with providing value to a company.
I'll add another point here. I'm going to kind of divert a little bit because I had a thought from earlier that I think your comments kind of triggered me here on some other.
I trigger you a lot.
Triggered my thoughts here. So I think a lot of what your background is shapes a lot of how you view Power BI. And what I mean by this is, if you come from a SQL background, you're going to do a lot of your data transformations inside SQL. So when you're looking at your resume, and I see a lot of SSIS, I see a lot of background in SQL, I see some classes, maybe some training done around SQL. I kind of expect you to. What I find in the space is if you know SQL, you don't rely as heavily on Power Query. You basically use SQL as your data transformation, and you just lob views over to Power BI and use them there. So I feel like this is a very common pattern. If I find Excel users and they talk about like, hey, I'm the business user, I came from Excel, that's my space. I find that those users are more heavily invested in the Power Query space. And so I think part of this too is when I'm looking at resumes, I'm actually, as a person who's trying to fill a role, I'm connecting what our company does a little bit with whatever your skill set is. So just because you're an expert in Power Query, and that may not necessarily jive with what our business unit is doing or what our team is doing from a hiring standpoint. So I just feel like a lot of even still, highlight what you're good at, highlight where your emphasis is, and tell us where you kind of came from. Give us a little bit of context there. I'm a SQL guy. This is my strength. I'm really good in that. And then we can kind of pick on those skills a little bit more, see how you do there, as opposed to having to pick very heavily on the Power Query skills. I think in some of our earlier interviews, we were picking too hard on skills people just didn't have, right? We had Power Query on our list. It was kind of like the first list of questions we were going to hit, and we were hitting that section too hard, and people just didn't know it. And we're like, well, let's come back and look at what we do in our company and say, what does the company do? Well, we do a lot of SQL. Okay, so we should probably de-emphasize some of the Power Query things and just kind of gloss over that. Do you understand some basic concepts? And then move into more of these other heavier areas where, that we have to align what our company does to the skills that we want to hire.
So kind of to the skills point of view, I think, and I believe you guys, we had this conversation, I think one of our first episodes, but something, so I think you'll disagree with me. But I still think that the certification, but this was also in the chat too. We didn't even mention it.
Yep. DA 100 was showing up.
DA 100.
Yep.
So, and I mean, to me, not that it doesn't make sense why you wouldn't, but it's the officially certified by Microsoft, the only certification available for Power BI by
Correct.
Microsoft.
Yep.
This is not, I learned on LinkedIn, the Microsoft owns LinkedIn, but that's good too. but but from a certification point of view,
yes,
like to me, I don't know why you wouldn't do it. Does it explain everything? Absolutely not.
No.
But I think that to me, it's part of an initiative. In part, you're kind of going out. This is not like the certification for engineering or logistics where you're like, you can't get this job until you take that certification.
Correct.
We're not in that industry. I get that.
Yep.
But man, like, I don't know why you wouldn't.
I'd like to see someone taking some initiative and doing some extracurricular learning. I mean, if you can say you've gone through the, paid for the courses and gone through Marco Russo's training, right? I mean, that's a level of depth that I want to make sure you can understand it and get through those kind of things, right? I've been able to go study up and do the DA 100, but again, while those things I think are kind of like good points to put on a resume from like I've taken the initiative, I've gone above and beyond. Maybe take a Udacity course, maybe take something that's open, an open source course. I think those are cool. And if you're in a company that you're doing Power BI today, I would highly recommend put on your training plan with your company and say, I want to be better at Power BI for you, the company. Here's things I want to go do, and hopefully your company will support you in that. But on the other hand, I would also say, like, particularly when we get to interviews, I like seeing you click around desktop. Honestly, I think when we're talking in the interview side of things, I can't tell you how many people have told me they know how to do things, and then I love to ask the question like, okay, what do you have installed on your machine right now? Do you have Tabular Editor? Do you have DAX Studio? Do you have Power BI Desktop? And then hopefully they have Power BI Desktop installed. I'm like, do you mind sharing your screen? And then we'll go into a simple example. And now the best thing I like to do now is for every interview is, okay, open up Power BI Desktop. There's already a data set that's built in. Click through the load data from Power BI Desktop report screen and show me right away. Like, and I'll another random side note, I'll check your version of Power BI Desktop on your machine. Like if you're staying up with the program, if you're kind of actively engaged in developing, I would also expect you're probably going to be on the latest version of desktop. So if you're not, I'm thinking you're not opening the program very often. So like those are things that I'm actively looking for, and I want to see, please build me a bar chart. please make a calculation for total sales using the sum function. Simple things like that I think should be very easy. And frankly, it should be so basic that it should be fluid on the screen. I should be able to easily watch you go through, click a new measure, and move things around, and I shouldn't watch you stumble around the screen. If I see a lot of stumbling, to me that's a red flag that says I'm not spending enough time in the
Yeah.
desktop.
I mean,
Mike, we all
that
know what your first question is show me Starticulator, please.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. I
Explain.
mean, that's it's interview, right?
Yeah.
Interview. We
That's-
should probably just do a podcast on like interview tactics and
Yeah.
things like that. But I would say that the certification question is
Yeah.
out there all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna stack rank the interesting things that you could accomplish or do on a resume in order of priority, and being able to accomplish, right? It's going to be, show me a report, show me a published web report, show me an example of the work that you do that you're proud of, that you want to represent to me. The second thing that I'm more interested in is a blog or a
Okay.
community post. Show me how you think, right? Show me, can you explain things or you understand a concept? Because those things require you to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Certifications are
Yeah.
exactly like a job. Go learn this thing to
Yeah.
pass a test, and then it's gone.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Like all you're doing is taking a test. And while there's some value in that for some organizations more over than other, because Microsoft licensing and things like that,
Yep.
there's a lot of value in additional certifications. Like the certification is the lowest thing on my radar as
Oh,
far as
wow.
like Power BI, because all it is a test. And
But it's
you
the
don't
only
like,
test.
but it doesn't tell me anything, Tommy.
Okay.
Right? Like if you're expect, like what people are saying is like, does taking a certification set me apart? And I don't think so. It means you can take a test.
So to me, it's not so much about the test. To me, it's that person literally going out to all learning fast.
It shows some initiative.
And
Sure.
to me, like, and I agree, because it's like that is not going to show someone who's going to provide impact, because that's not really what it's, that's not what the exam's really showcasing.
Correct.
But to me, the person is obviously gone out there going, can I get certified in this? Where can I basically like put out my tentacles everywhere I can, so to speak?
Sure. But
So-
no, putting out my tentacles is create a free report,
Yep.
join a free community. And what you're saying is pay for a certification. And I'm saying
you
these
gotta
two free
pass it.
things
Have
are
higher
more
weight.
valuable than the paid thing.
I'd agree with that. I'd
And
echo
listen-
that one too.
Listen, I mean, at the end of the day, I think I agree with you. Where if the person just
You
had a
don't have
certificate,
to.
no, I'm not. I don't want to, but like if the person just had the certification and did not have those, the community or that desire, yeah, like that's not showing me anything. But I would consider. I don't want to say considerable, but there'd be a significant weight if I had 3 people who all had a blog post and I saw their report and they were somewhat similar, and one guy did the exam. To me, that's, again, it's almost not so much about the exam. It's the fact that they knew it was out there, and they said they're doing everything they can to kind of, present themselves, because
Yep,
it's showing
sure.
the value. So that's where I see where the certification fits in the
not-
resume.
I'm not saying there's no value. I'm just
No.
saying
Less value.
You cannot survive on
less,
it alone.
less,
So
less value to me.
I don't
because
think-
there's a lot of people out there that do it, right? So
yeah,
in the same way, it's not distinctive.
yeah.
I'd agree with that one. And I would also say I'm not going to hire someone purely if I had 2 people virtually identical and one had the DA 100. I would be looking at other areas to differentiate on, and not necessarily saying, "Oh, they've done the DA 100, therefore I'm gonna pick you first." So I
Well,
don't think it's a hard requirement
yeah.
that you have to have that
So,
done.
and maybe it's my mindset with the certification. Like when it came out, I took it, and it was one of the first things I did for both, because I felt like I should, because I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm in this space.
Yeah.
Not that, oh, this will be my distinguishing factor, but it's like, well, man, if I do this every day, you better have this.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it just for myself, not necessarily
Yeah.
for anyone else. So
I took it because my company found a lot of value in certifications
Yeah.
being passed. Right.
It's sometimes a sales tool, right? We've got X number of certified
Sure.
people in these things, and so
Sure.
that's they're paying for it, so we'll
Right.
take it. I took the original one, not the DA 100. The DA 100 is the new one, but I took
Yeah.
the original one of those cold turkey, and I was a little bit nervous. I was like, I don't know, but
yeah.
passed first time, so I'm like, oh, okay, at least I kind of know what I'm doing. All right, I think we're at a kind of a good wrap-up point. We've had some really good conversation. Win, thank you very much for the question. The topic was amazing. Win's
Yeah,
been actually
loved it.
extremely engaged on the chat window. So Win, thank you very much. I hope you're still listening and enjoying the conversation. Go reach out, Win. Go hire some more people for your company from the chat window, because it seems like these are the engaged people. These are the people in our community that are going above and beyond. And plus, they listen to Explicit Measures.
Yeah.
Therefore,
the number one factor.
the number one Power BI podcast. I don't even know if that's true or not. Anyways,
Like fifth, so
fifth, sixth. I don't know. We're somewhere in the list. Anyways, thank you guys for chatting about this. This has been a great topic, super cool area. Just really enjoy this. I learned a lot today. Lots of different perspectives. This is super cool. Tommy, where can you find some of the podcast?
You can find some and also all of the podcast on a few. we're breaking it up, so everyone's got to search for it.
Yeah, exactly.
You can find the podcast on anywhere a podcast is available: Apple, Spotify, Anchor. We do live streams every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central Time. If you want to join the conversation, Wynn's topic actually came from a YouTube comment, so I'm going to put that out there too.
Yep.
If you want to suggest a topic for us to slightly argue about or very much argue about,
For sure.
you can do it in 3 ways now. You can either comment on the YouTube video.
Yep.
Make sure to do it in the comment and not the live chat. Comment in there, say what do you think is a good topic or conversation. You can go to the powerbi.tips/explicit measure podcast, and at the very bottom there's a form, or mention Power BI tips on Twitter and with the hashtag EMP mailbag. Also, please, if you like the content today, please like and send a rating or review on the Apple Podcast and Spotify. Like it on YouTube. And I think the biggest thing you can do for us is share the word or spread the word. We love the community that we have here. We love these conversations, but we love the more people that have been listening as well. So please try to tell a friend, share the word, and get the word out there.
Someone actually asked a really good question. Johnny was asking, how do I get notified about YouTube? So if you're on YouTube, if you're following us on YouTube, please subscribe. That'll notify you that'll at least put it when the sessions come out. And these are all live sessions, so they'll automatically be there. Hit the little bell as well. The bell should notify you when we do these podcasts. So they should let you know when we're starting the live sessions, and that'll kind of ping your mobile device or whatever the YouTube app that you have is. It should notify you there as well. So turn your notifications on. That's how you can catch us live every Tuesday and Thursday.
And yeah, one thing you can do too that I do to myself for myself is we have a Power BI Tips as a playlist with the Explicit Measures podcast and future episodes. You can go to that episode and say, remind me when this is live.
Awesome.
So that's a really great way. And sometimes I have to do it to remember.
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate you for participating. It's been a great audience. As always, you guys are awesome. Please feel free to, if you find someone else who might find value from this podcast, please just tell one other person. That's something simple for us to keep growing the audience and just keep having fun. We're going to enjoy this, and we'll have some more great topics coming up in the following weeks. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you soon.